side. There were so many times I came so close. Old man death tried to take me in. So the reason I'm here, and it's hard to say, but it's so easy to explain. It was God's grace.
God's grace.
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 I made it this far by the grace of God. I remember the time that I strayed away. Even though I knew the word, still I didn't obey. But his mercy and his grace stayed with me and brought me all the way. God's grace.
God's grace.
It was God's grace.
God's grace.
It was God's grace.
God's grace.
It was God's grace.
God's grace.
I made it this far by the grace of God. It was God's grace.
God's grace.
It was God's grace.
God's grace.
It was God's grace.
God's grace.
His amazing grace.
God's